Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to the Right to Adversity podcast. I'm your host with Jeffy. It's been a while. It's been about almost going on to 3 weeks. Welcome back. In our quest to study greatness, yes, that's what this podcast is about. We want to study the lives of people who have done extraordinary things, those who have lived great lives. And going through adversity is key. There's always difficulty when you are doing great things. You remember in our episode on Jensen Juan, what Jensen said when in a 60-minute interview, the interviewer asked him, some people complain that they work insane hours at NVIDIA and that they were working too much. He said doing great things is not meant to be easy. That's our belief, that great things will be difficult and we want the right to have difficulty in our lives. William Bowerman, known to his athletes and friends alike, still represents this idea, this quest to do hard things. Bill is known as the co-founder of Nike, along with Phil Knight. But before there was Nike, Bill Bowerman was making shoes. In fact, the first person to wear Bowerman's shoe was Phil Knight, who used to run under Bowerman. Bowerman was his coach. This, I would say, is where Phil Knight got the seed of an idea to start a shoe company. Bill Bowerman would later partner with him. Before we continue, we will ask that you subscribe to the channel. We need 1,000 followers before we can monetize. We are now at only 47. We have a long way to go. Help make our dream a reality. Also, like this video, comment and share. When I think of Bill Bowerman, I think of a Renaissance man. I think of a Leonardo da Vinci. I'm not saying he's on that level. He's on that Da Vinci level in terms of artistry. But like Da Vinci, he was someone who had wide interest. He had interest in various sports, history, local and state government, health, or should we put that under sports too? No. I believe we should separate sports from health. The question is, who was Bill Bowerman? I have said a little about him. Now let's dig deeper. Or you know what? Let's go to a very reliable source. let's look at Wikipedia, what Wikipedia says about it. So according to Wikipedia, William J. Bowerman was born on February 19, 1911. He was an American track and field coach and co-founder of Nike. I've already mentioned that. Over his career, he trained 31 Olympic athletes, 51 All-Americans, 12 American record holders, 22 NCAA champions, and 16 sub-4-minute milers. Or we can ignore all of that info from Wikipedia. He was simply an athletics coach. He hated to be called coach though. His athletes simply called him Bill. But let's not confuse he telling them to call him Bill with familiarity. How do I explain this? It wasn't that he wasn't approachable. He was. But he kept his distance. He did some crazy rituals. Let me give you two. He would see his athletes taking their shower and pee on their legs. To initiate new athletes for the team, he would be in a sauna, think of a hot tub, with the team, including the new athletes. He would keep a key in the sauna and put it on their thighs to bend them, a form of bandage. For some of them, their skin will be raw for a few days. Regardless of all these practices, he was somewhat aloof. This is a good segue to the first lesson. He always preferred that athletes come to him for help. Let's go back a little before we continue. Then I share the first lesson. The lessons I will be sharing here are from the book Bowerman and the Men of Oregon by Kenny Moore. The writer Kenny Moore was coached by Bowerman, and it's a well-written book. I have taken up running and it's made me more interested in it. I would suggest that you read the book too. In fact, I will advise that you read all the books I'll be discussing on the podcast. Podcasts can help, but there is no substitute to reading a book completely. There have been several times I will listen to numerous interviews of one person, but I read a book that the same person has written, and I see gems that I hadn't seen anywhere else. So I highly recommend book reading, and especially this book. Now, where were we? Yes, so Bowerman preferred his athletes come to him for help. A story is told in the book where his wife asked him to intervene with his first son. The boy was a chip of the old block. He was always in one problem or another, just like Bowerman had been as a young man. Bill was always in brawls because he wouldn't suck up to anyone, especially bullies, and was willing to fight. In fact, It seemed he looked forward to it. When his wife made the axe, Bill didn't want to intervene. His wife was perplexed why he wouldn't want to intervene, as Bill intervened in the life of his athletes, especially when their activities would affect their performance. Bill's response was that his athletes asked for help, and that was why he involved himself. His son wasn't asking for him. But in the end, he gave his son a fair warning, as his school principal had warned him when he was in high school that his behavior wouldn't make his mother proud. This brings us to the first lesson from the life of Bill, which is accept and give tough love. So I ask sometimes because it is wild not to talk to your son for behaving badly because he has not asked for help. Before we continue, I want to open the parenthesis. Bill sit down with his principal reminds me of a story Andy Stamp told on the Joko podcast. So Andy Stamp got into an altercation with someone. He had a gun, but the person kept coming towards him with a knife. And if I remember correctly, threatening that he would take the gun from Andy Stamp, the gun he was holding, and kill him with it. He shot the guy. The guy didn't die, but the guy pressed charges. During the court proceedings, it came out that the guy was a hardened criminal. He had just finished a sentence for armed robbery. The judge luckily dismissed the case, but the judge gave Andy Stamp a firm warning and counseled him to do something with his life, perhaps join the military. He immediately joined. So the story with Bill just reminded me of that story, and it's a hell of a story as told by Andy Stamp. There's more context than I'm adding, but that's not the focus of the episode. You can check out that part for yourself. Bill had a penchant for vanishing people too. What does this mean? I'm not talking about murder. He would kick people off his teams who did not follow his rules. Or should I say the rules? The rules were not onerous. It wasn't like just do what I say because I say it. It was more like do what I say because it will be good for you and it will be good for the team. In the book, there was an American footballer who doubled as a runner for Bill's track team. He was their best runner. Bill called him for a sit down. The guy had a hangover before a race. His teammate had to pull him out of bed for that race. He won the race, but Bill would have a sit down. Bill warned him that the next time it happened, he would kick him off the team. The runner said he couldn't do it as he was the best on the team. Bill told him he would do it easily. The runner never tried Bill. He stopped his drinking and partying. Bill liked to be distant from his athletes, although in the book they don't intimate as to why he used that approach. What is that popular saying? Familiarity breeds contempt. For anyone who has worked with people, you come to the conclusion that messing around with people, especially your subordinates, is a terrible strategy. They can't stand the switch from friendship to work. They see you as their friend and don't take your word seriously. Besides, what are you, their friend, going to do to them? Kick them off the team? Let them lose their job? Yes, you have to be friendly, but there's a line you shouldn't cross. I don't have to spell out what you have to do or not do. I know you understand what I'm saying. So for Bill, there was always some air of formality. He was unconventional in a lot of ways. I mean, he wouldn't let his athletes call him coach, but you couldn't mess around. This reminds me of a fictional example, that of Jon Snow in A Song of Ice and Fire. Okay, Game of Thrones, if you don't know the name of the book series. I'm going full nerd on you now. In the books or show, Jon Snow becomes Lord Commander of the Night Watch, and he decides to no longer mix with his previous friends. He badly wanted to mix with them, but he also knew that if he mixed with them, they wouldn't take him seriously. Their banter wouldn't make them respect his position as their leader, as the Lord Commander of the Night Watch. To some distance is required. You might say to hell with all I'm saying, no problem. Ignore the advice, and I bet you will learn from hard experience. So that's lesson 1. Let's go on to lesson number 2 that I learned from reading the book. So lesson number 2 is this: have some courage. There were several instances Bill showed courage. The culminating one would be going to enemy territory during World War II to tell German leadership on his front to surrender. He went with an interpreter, just a few men with an American flag, and off they went. Wherever they would stop at a German barrier, he would ask to speak with the person in charge till he finally got to speak to him. Bowerman's point was simple. The Germans had lost the war, and there was no need for further fighting. They should surrender their weapons and live in peace. The person in charge on his front mentioned that he would have to relay Bill's message to the higher-ups. Though the Germans didn't get clearance quickly, what Bill did stop the fighting. No more Germans would die, and neither would Americans. The story is more impressive than I'm trying to relay. To go into enemy territory like that, you couldn't do it if you didn't have balls. That wasn't the only time Bill showed courage. When Phil Knight started the company that morphed into Nike Blue Origin, Bill asked Phil to cut him on the deal. At the time, Phil Knight was importing shoes from Japan. To be honest, you lived a hell of a life if the most impressive thing you did wasn't to be a co-founder of a multi-billion-dollar company. As we just seen, he did more impressive things than co-founding Nike. Bill put his money into Blue Origin and became 50% owner. Phil Knight owned the other half. Then he told Phil to change the share structure to 49 to 51 in Phil's favor, so that when they were at a stalemate, Phil could make the final call. Bill showed grace. This also required courage. At the time, Bill was the bigger man and could have forced his will on Phil, but he didn't do it. He wanted Phil Knight to be in charge of his own company. Phil Knight also never took Bill for granted. The writer of the book tells a story about he having had the chance to invest in Nike, but chose not to do so. This was at a time that the company needed money badly. Bill told him to put some money into the company. Bill, being the honest man he was, also told him the risk involved. More, the writer of the book about Bill Bowerman decided that the risk was too much for him. He went on a vacation with the money. When Nike went public, Bill drove to Moore's house and told him how much he would have made had he invested in Nike. After giving him that much short-term information, he hurriedly left. He came to rub it in his face. Bill took other risks in his life. He ran for state governor and lost. He would try new ideas with his team. That was a wellspring for the shoe business, as we've already mentioned. And as we've mentioned, and he would also make concoctions for his team. Think of it as electrolyte before they became popular. He would experiment with different training regimens and would learn from colleagues all around the world. One idea that is really a mindfuck is reducing workload for his athletes. You would assume that the more you do, the better you become. Bill made his athletes have a lot of rest as he made the actual sessions intense. That made his athletes run faster. The idea is counterintuitive and even his athletes rebelled against it, but he couldn't refuse Bill. And the results showed. Those who he started experimenting with the new protocol were clocking better times. That's what finally convinced his teams. It takes courage to do less to accomplish more. And it wasn't a blind risk he took. He always experimented with one person, and if the idea worked, he made his team adopt it. Lesson number 3. Be intense to build great things. Nike has an internal magazine that says, "Remember the man." This is a tribute to Bowerman. Bowerman wouldn't be nice when an inferior product was brought before him. During meetings, he would take a weighing scale from his briefcase and weigh shoes. If shoes were not light, he would go into a rant. For him, products were to mean something. A company is to provide value. One time in a meeting, he asked Phil Knight what the vision of the company was. Phil responded that their vision was to make money. Bill countered that their vision was to make the best product possible. Product that will make people rave. It's that intensity and quest for excellence that made him go out to a shoemaker shop to ask how difficult it would be to make a shoe. The shoemaker wanted to make things look complicated, but Bill left the conversation with the idea that he could make shoes for his runners himself. Bill's hypothesis was simple. If he could reduce the weight of his runners' shoes while making them comfortable, he could reduce the drag on the athletes, making them run faster times. I want to go back a little and pick up a thread of something we just spoke about. This is about Bill asking Phil what the vision of the company is. Here we learn two things. The first is the courage to ask hard questions. I listened to an episode of Connected Minds podcast. The host interviewed Sami J, who is a businessman. Sami was asked if he is comfortable working with friends and family. He said, absolutely. Family and friends know the backstory and are often more committed. He added that at some point he fired his own brother, and at some point his sister didn't talk to him for 4 years, but he didn't care. And of course, Sami is a special person. Uh, but of course, there are trade-offs working alongside family. He said the problem with most people is that they fear confrontation. They fear conflict with those close to them, and that is where the problem lies. I repeat for emphasis. But Bill didn't hold back from asking tough questions, as seen from the question he asked your night. The second idea is to know what game you are playing. In almost every profession, there are two modes, the bank and the church. I would explain. On the Visionaries podcast, Rick Rubin explained this exact dichotomy. Rick, who is a legendary record producer, said he was once talking with Jimmy Iovine, who is also a record producer. Jimmy Iovine said, Rick, you know the difference between you and me? I'm in the bank business, and you're in the church business. Rick Rubin went on to explain, Jimmy Iovine's goal is to make money. His goal as Rick Rubin is to make great music. This is not to say Jimmy is not trying to make great music. Of course he is. But he is optimizing for money. Casey Neistat, the YouTuber, explained these modes of thinking by saying in an interview that the difference between Mr. Beast and himself was that Mr. Beast was trying to build an empire, but he was only trying to make great videos. Doing something for its own sake, for the beauty, for craftsmanship, it sounds pure. Maybe that's what we should all do. So Bowerman was building a church, Phil Knight was building a bank. But if I'm being honest with myself, I'll prefer a bank. Bill's intensity could make him do crazy things. They were on the good side of Pando. One time, he had twins on his track team. He talked them into a prank. One twin would hide in a cave during a race and replace the other, making one athlete seem to run an impossible time. When the time came, the boys were scared and couldn't pull it off, to Bill's dismay. That says a lot about Bill's healthy relationship with those on his team, that he was able to think of the plan and share it with his boys. This helps us segue into the fourth lesson from the book, build great relationships. First of all, Bill had a great relationship with his wife. By all accounts, he treated her with respect. They were married for more than 6 decades. When Bowerman found jogging, his wife would go jogging with him. If their relationship wasn't great, she wouldn't have done that. Bill cultivated great relationships with so many people, from businessmen to childhood friends to fellow coaches, including those in other countries. Bill was genuinely interested in people. Given his job, those he was around most often were his athletes. He would look for jobs for them when they didn't get scholarships. He would do so for those from poor families who could do with some extra income. Bowerman would often have a goal-setting session with his athletes. He made sure that running didn't make a student's academic results suffer. You could be kicked off the team for having bad academic results. I'm not sure about this. This might be me projecting, but it sounds like something Bill Bowerman will do. He once had a session with the legendary runner Steve Prefontaine, who died early to the heartbreak of the running world. Steve was considered one of the best runners of his era, and he had charisma. His style of running made the crowd love him. Before reading the book, I didn't know there were that many technicalities to running. For me, to run is just to grab your shoes and take off. But at the high level, it takes a lot. For example, running in front of a pack can mean that you are using up more energy. You expend more energy fighting against the wind's drag. If someone is running ahead of you, that person will be blocking the wind for you. Prefontaine, known affectionately as Pre, would almost always take the lead in a run. It's like a boxer who counts to give a good fight with hard punches, rather than plotting to win on points. So Pre gave the people a spectacle, and they loved him for it. In Praise Go's second session with Bill, Bill created a phantom position for him at Nike as Pri was about to graduate. This does not mean he did nothing. Pri's goal was to make people, especially the youth, love running. Pri organized an international meet in Oregon and runners all over the world attended. He died in a car accident not soon afterward. The way Bill looked after his athletes' interests reminds me of another legendary coach, Dean Smith. Dean Smith. Smith was Michael Jordan's coach when Michael was in the university. So Smith advised Michael Jordan, who he was coaching, to go pro. Although Jordan staying with Dean's team would have been to Dean's benefit, but Dean did that for almost all of his players. So a lesson from the life of Bowerman about building great friendships is to nourish it. He organized a standing Tuesday brunch where he would meet weekly with his friends, including former athletes. They would just chat. There was always food, though, and sometimes they would take decisions in that informal setting. The lesson here is to meet with your friends in person sometimes. Lesson number 5. Do good, but don't let the world know. Let's look at Genghis Khan. Now, what has Genghis Khan got to do with anything? What has he got to do with Obama? I will explain. Genghis Khan, for those who know him, was ruthless. He conquered a large number of the Earth peoples, but there's no statue of him. He didn't build any monuments to his name. A deficiency of such great conquerors, or by extension, a lot of great men, is that they're often egomaniacs. In this instance, Bowerman was like Genghis Khan. He didn't like for things to be named after him. He didn't like publicity. He also didn't like his acts of charity to be traced back to him. He gave out hundreds of thousands of dollars to institutions in the name of his friends. He once heard a young woman sing at church. He fell in love with her voice and put her through music school. He did the charity in the name of his friend's wife, who kept receiving thank you notes from the lady for years. Finally, it didn't sit well with her, so she told the singer the source of the gift. Lesson number 6, and this is the last lesson. Work with your hands, or should I say, work with your body. Bouge, bouge. Move your body. I tend to like people who work with their hands. Bill was such a person. He was a farmer, a shoemaker, among many of the hats he wore. He ran one of Nike's research and development labs and would often butt heads with the R&D lab at the headquarters, as he believed they were turning out subpar products. He couldn't have the authority to tell the team these things if he didn't know how to build the shoe himself. Bill wrote a bestseller titled Jogging. The book popularized jogging and by extension increased Nike sales. Moving our body is good for us. It makes us healthier. We have a longer lifespan and health span. I'm a firm believer that a lot of knowledge is emergent. There's a lot you learn as you actually do things. So get your hands dirty. Don't let your fears of what others would say stop you. Bill's a good exhibit for the spirit of the podcast. He saw a lot of adversity. His twin brother died when he was a toddler. His father left the family and married another woman. Blue Origin shoes, when they started the company, would often arrive from Japan with serious defects. Athletics governing bodies would frustrate him when he was trying to organize meets. He would inhale poisonous gases from the shoe experiments, leading to nerve damage. Bill died on 24 December 1999. We often regret the things we don't do rather than the things we do. If there's one lesson we would learn from Bill's life, let it be this. Recall the motto from Nike, just do it. Thanks for listening to this episode. Subscribe. Cheers.